When you hear the phrase Bible Belt, your mind probably goes straight to the American South, a region where faith isn't just a Sunday ritual. It's woven into politics, culture, schools, and even identity. But here's a surprising question. Could Europe, a continent long described as secular, even post-Christian, be quietly forming its own version of the Bible Belt? It sounds almost absurd at first. After all, Europe is famous for empty cathedrals, declining church attendance, and an ever-growing population of people who openly call themselves non-religious. But once you look closer, the story isn't as straightforward as it seems. Because underneath the headlines of secularization, there are pockets of revival, strongholds of faith, and unexpected trends that are reshaping the continent's religious future. So today, let's dive into that question. Is Europe truly becoming the new Bible Belt? Or is something much more complex happening right under our eyes? Across Europe, surveys tell a consistent story. Christianity is shrinking. Over the past few decades, tens of millions of Europeans have stopped identifying with the faith that once defined the continent. Countries like France, Sweden, and the Netherlands report single-digit percentages of weekly worship attendance. In cities like Copenhagen or Brussels, entire generations have grown up with little to no connection to organized religion. The Pew Research Center and other surveys show a sharp rise in people who identify as knowns, not tied to any faith. In fact, in some Western European countries, the religiously unaffiliated now outnumber active Christians. If you stop here, the conclusion seems obvious. Europe is secularizing at a pace unmatched anywhere else in the developed world. But here's the twist. Europe isn't a monolith. What's true in Sweden isn't true in Poland. What's happening in France isn't what's happening in Romania. The moment you zoom into the details, the picture starts to fracture. And that's where the Bible Belt comparison suddenly becomes more interesting. Take Poland, for example. For much of the 20th century, Poland wasn't just Catholic. It was one of the most Catholic nations on earth. The church wasn't just a place of worship. It was a fortress of identity. During the communist era, Catholicism stood as a defiant counterweight to state atheism. The late Pope John Paul II was Polish, and his papacy only deepened the bond between nation and church. For decades, to be Polish was, almost by definition, to be Catholic. But times are changing. Mass attendance in Poland has been falling rapidly, especially among younger generations. Once, over 90% of Poles attended Mass regularly. Today, it's far lower, with some regions reporting historic drops. Scandals within the church, political controversies, and broader cultural shifts are eroding trust. And yet, Catholicism still wields enormous influence in Polish politics, shaping debates on issues like abortion and education. In this sense, Poland echoes a Bible Belt dynamic, a region where religion continues to guide political choices, even as actual practice declines. Now let's look at Romania. Here, the Orthodox Church isn't just a faith. It's a cornerstone of national identity. More than 80% of Romanians identify as Orthodox Christians, one of the highest levels in Europe. On religious feast days, churches overflow, and the church remained a powerful social and cultural presence. But here, too, we see a paradox. Identification is high, but regular practice is lower. Many Romanians call themselves Orthodox, even if they don't attend services every week. For them, being Orthodox is as much about heritage and belonging as it is about belief. Still, the Orthodox Church retains significant authority in politics and culture, reinforcing a sense that faith in Romania is alive and influential in a way that Western Europe struggles to imagine. Then there's the United Kingdom. For decades, headlines proclaimed the death of British Christianity. The Church of England, once called the Tory Party at Prayer, has been shrinking for years. Cathedrals stand half empty, and census after census shows the rise of the knowns. But beneath those numbers, something unexpected is happening. New forms of Christianity are growing, driven largely by immigrants and young people. African Pentecostal churches, Latin American congregations, and charismatic youth movements are thriving in London, Birmingham, and Manchester. These communities are vibrant, energetic, and expanding. A 2023 survey even suggested that church attendance among some British youth is climbing again. So while Britain may look secular on the surface, It's also home to some of the fastest growing churches in Europe. That doesn't look like decline. It looks like transformation. Immigration is, in fact, one of the biggest forces reshaping European religion. In Germany, African and Eastern European congregations are on the rise. In France, communities of immigrants from West Africa and Latin America are revitalizing old parishes. In Portugal and Spain, Brazilian Catholic and Pentecostal groups are booming. These churches aren't just places of worship. They double as social networks, cultural anchors, and community lifelines. For immigrants navigating new societies, faith offers belonging and stability. And in turn, it reshapes the religious map of Europe's biggest cities. Walk through certain neighborhoods in Berlin, Paris, or London, and you'll find churches more alive than many in the American South. Now let's talk politics. In America's Bible Belt, churches directly shape politics. Evangelical blocs can swing elections, influence national debates, and dictate social policy. But in Europe, the story is more complicated. In Poland, Catholic leaders have successfully influenced abortion laws. In Romania, Orthodox leaders remain key voices in national debates. But in most of Western Europe, France, Germany, the UK, churches rarely wield that kind of direct control. Secular states, pluralistic societies, and diverse populations mean that religion's political power is limited. Yes, there are sparks of influence. But unlike in America's South, there's no monolithic voting bloc. Europe's religious voice is fragmented. So where does all this leave us? If Europe is secularizing overall, but also seeing pockets of growth, political flashpoints, and immigrant-driven revivals, is it fair to call it the new Bible Belt? The truth is, no. Europe isn't becoming the next Bible Belt. It's becoming something else entirely, a mosaic, a patchwork of decline and renewal, of secular spaces and vibrant faith communities, of countries where religion fades. In Scandinavia, churches may be museums. In Romania, they're powerhouses. In Britain, they're shrinking in one corner and booming in another. In Poland, they're politically strong, but losing the youth. This isn't a single story. It's many stories at once. And that may be the real lesson here. The future of faith in Europe won't be simple, and it won't be uniform. It will be fractured, complex, and full of surprises. So let's return the question. Is Europe becoming the new Bible Belt? The answer is not exactly. What Europe is becoming is a continent of contrasts, places where the sacred and the secular coexist side by side, where immigrant revivals rise against a backdrop of historic decline, where identity and practice don't always align. And maybe that's more interesting than a new Bible Belt, because it tells us that faith, in all its complexity, refuses to disappear, even in the most secular corners of the world. So perhaps the real question isn't whether Europe will mirror America's Bible Belt, but what new stories of belief, power, and identity are still waiting.